Welcome to another episode of Sustainability Happy Hour. I am one of your hosts, Pat Keys, lead scientist at the School of Global Environmental Sustainability, aka SoGES, and this is my co-host.
Hi, everybody. I'm Micah Bennett. I do communications at the School of Global Environmental Sustainability. Hope you're all doing well.
We have to, I think at some point we need to be, if I say School of Global Environmental Sustainability, all 15 syllables of it, I think we can agree to just use the acronym from here on out. What do you think?
Yeah, but I like making it a little bit awkward for everybody.
Yeah, okay. All right. So maybe today we can just refer to the School of Global Environmental Sustainability as the School of Global Environmental Sustainability throughout the entire show because, yeah, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Okay, so how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. It's Friday, you know. How are you doing?
I don't know. It's 2020. It's still 2020.
It's so hard to tell.
I mean, yesterday, I was in a meeting at 3 o'clock. I promise this is not a boring story. I was in a meeting at 3 o'clock, and it looked like the apocalypse when we started the meeting. And then by the end of the meeting, around 3:30, 3:45, it looked like the apocalypse had left, and then the apocalypse's big brother or big sister had shown up because it was even darker and oranger and redder outside. So that's sort of, I'm just glad that it might snow this weekend.
I didn't think I'd be saying that in October, but I am glad it might snow.
I know. I think that's going to be so important. Anyway, fun fact time.
Let's get away from the doom and gloom. Fun
exactly.
fact.
I've got a fun fact. It's not. I cannot claim this as my own. And I guess this is sort of turning into one of those times. Maybe I'm just turning into one of those parents that is just like, look at all the cool stuff that my children are doing.
You can start a separate Twitter account now.
What's that?
You can start a separate Twitter account for all the funny things your kids say. And then you'll start making up things to make them sound really, really clever.
Right. I don't have to though, because so look at the cool stuff. So my son is 6, and he's been going around the neighborhood with his uncle naming things. And so this is something kids do. It's like, there's Big Tree Hill or whatever. And but they've been making this hand-drawn map. And so I'm going to share this right now.
Oh my goodness.
What's that?
I'm just really excited.
Okay, so let's see if I can zoom in. It's not working. It's not working. Let's see if I go like this. Can I zoom in? It doesn't let me zoom in. Here we go. Okay, that's better. So if you sort of, let's see here.
My first thought is that I really like that Circle Park is a rectangle.
Yeah, okay. So, but just look at some of these names. So he's been wandering around, and let's see, now I can zoom in. Okay, so we've got, our cul-de-sac is called the Slant Slide, and he's named the trail behind our house the Fields Time Trail. We have Home Island.
Need its own time sometimes.
It does. Home Island and Second Home Island. You go down the street and you might run into the Haunted Spook. This is all just from his mind. Duck Falls, the Level Reach Tree, Raccoon Town Lighthouse. There's a small lighthouse there, but there were also a lot of raccoon prints, and so that's where that comes from.
It's a very
place called Rockfield. What's that?
He's a very logical child.
He's a very logical. This is true. But then, Wrong Way Trail, the Bumping Bridge, Don't Know Home, the Scraggly Path, the Moon Rock, the Dancing End. I just love this idea. So actually, the story is he's been making this map, and then this museum that I actually follow on Twitter has been talking about toponyms and the importance of free play during the pandemic. And so this fun fact is, I'm sharing this project that my son and his uncle are doing. But also I'm going to encourage you, our millions of viewers around the world, to go out and explore the place that you live. And it's fun to both learn the names that exist already, but some of these things don't have names, or at least they don't have names that mean something to you. And so maybe think about what these places mean to you, and to a 6-year-old at least. This is some of the names that he came up with. So fun fact, call to action, boom.
I love it.
Okay.
Well, that gave me time to think of my fun fact.
Hey, all right.
And my fun fact is that I was on campus yesterday I was actually on campus twice. Once I got my flu shot, which was great. So make sure everyone goes to get their flu shot.
Get your flu shot.
And then the second time was I was asked to be a debate judge for the Eco Leaders class. So the Eco Leaders are the group of students, undergraduate students that live in the residence halls and promote sustainability for their sort of cohort of students that they're responsible for. And they partner, I'm pretty sure they partner with GES for a 1-credit course. I'm pretty sure that's true, but don't quote me on it.
I don't know who's going to fact check you.
So anyways, they had a debate about whether sustainability is a privilege and a luxury or not. And so I went in to the classroom. It was an in-person class, and listened to the debate and was supposed to decide a winner. But the fun fact of this story is just that it was my first time being in like a CSU classroom since the pandemic. And it was just like a little wild to me how people had just really settled into the new routine. Like we all had assigned seats 6 feet away from each other. Everybody's wearing masks. I couldn't really hear anybody, but apparently everyone else had figured out how to like make out this mumbling that you hear from people.
Wow.
And so I just want to like give a shout out to our students out there that are just keep it on. Like I can't imagine being a freshman right now and living in the dorms and kind of having a once in a lifetime college experience. So good on you.
Well, you sure hope this is going to be once in a lifetime.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's cool. Some news articles?
Yeah, let's get to some news articles. We've got 2 or 3 that we're going to try and cover today very briefly. And then we will get, and we'll teaser, we're going to have our special guest coming on in probably about 10 minutes. Professor Mary Hill, visiting fellow at SoGES this year, although kind of virtual visiting fellow at SoGES. And we'll talk about food, energy, and water in about 10 minutes. But until then, we're going to cover the news a little bit. Do you want to go first or should I?
You can go first if you want.
Okay. So I've got, I'll start with one news item. Let's see here. So this is something we've been talking about kind of a lot over the, I guess, during the pandemic, that Arctic sea ice has been melting at sort of unprecedented rates this year. We had Dr. Zach Labe on earlier this year, who's been following the story. He's been following it for, I don't know, for probably at least the last year or two, and covering it quite effectively. And you can actually see in this article, so this article is from Yale Environment 360, and it's mostly talking about how Arctic sea ice has still not formed just off the coast of Siberia in Russia. And this is unprecedented. In kind of the recent past, about 10 years ago or around there, it was almost fully formed by now in the fall. The ice had refrozen to its sort of like peak winter level. And that hasn't happened. It hasn't even started to refreeze really yet. And so, surprise, look at this. This is one of Zach's figures, actually. But we see this is in the Laptev Sea, which if you don't have your globe handy, it's just off the coast of Siberia, eastern Siberia in Russia. And the red line is where we are right now in 2020. And we see that the extent of the spatial extent of the Laptev sea ice is still hugging 0 right now. It's just a little bit above that. But then you can also trace back up to the top line, which is that's where kind of the average frozen line is. And, a few years ago, it was completely frozen by now. So we're in completely unprecedented territory right now as far as Siberian ice goes. And this is the story that we've been talking about a little bit this summer in terms of this unprecedented warming that's taking place in the Arctic this year, these unprecedented temperature records, and then more records are being broken, and not in a good way. So this article is detailing that a little bit, digging into that. We actually see Zach is quoted right there in the article. But anyway, dig into that a little bit more. So I continue following the story. And yeah, why don't we just go to your article? We won't cover that third one. Maybe we'll post it in the notes.
Yeah. And for people that just checked in, we'll put these the links to these articles and anything else we talk about in sort of the post show notes, whether that's in the YouTube description or the Facebook comments. That's the plan.
Oh, wait a second. We got a quick comment. Just to zoom back to your fun fact.
Oh, yeah.
CSU Water Center here. Love the eco leaders. I judged the debate a year ago, and it was a lot of fun. They do a great job presenting their arguments. Cool. Thanks for the comment, CSU Water Center.
Yeah, and it's true. They do a great job presenting their arguments. I actually never declared a winner because I was truly torn between both sides. So
there you go.
Successful debate. So our second article is one that I think is really interesting. It's from the Washington Post, and it's "Wolves are on the ballot in Colorado." So there is a measure that Coloradoans can vote on in this election of whether the state should reintroduce wolves back into more than 17 million acres of public lands by the end of 2023. Now, I will just digress for 1 second. I was, where was I? I saw a picture of the plaza, and everyone had chalked on it. So like all the get out the vote items were on the plaza. And there was one that was a picture of a wolf with the phrase "restore the howl," referencing this ballot measure, but I did not know about this ballot measure at the time. And so I definitely thought they were talking about the howl that used to happen at 8 o'clock in Colorado. The 8 o'clock
howl, yeah.
Yeah. But in reality, they were talking about this ballot measure. And one thing that is interesting about it is that it's giving Coloradoans the nation's first vote on reintroducing an endangered species, which is typically a decision reserved for government scientists. So my understanding of this is that it is a bit uncommon to have this put up in a ballot measure as the vote, which is really like puts a lot of power in the hands of the people. And so wolves have been nearly extinct in Colorado for since like 1930. And this is because they were basically hunted down. Bounties were put on their heads. They were bad for livestock, hunting, and people back in the day just didn't really have a great understanding about sort of ecosystems and population management and the importance of predators. And so, you know, proponents are wanting wolves back in this territory where they always have been. But the other side of that is that it, you know, the opponents of the ballot say that it can cause economic harm. Cattle are very easy targets for wolves, and that can harm the economic viability of that business. And so the article kind of just gives a nice background of where we got to with wolves, how we got here, and the two different sides on the debate. And now you know that it's on the ballot and you can do your vote.
Yeah, actually, another 6-year-old story. We were explaining that because the other night I was voting, and we, my wife and I were explaining like what voting is to a 6-year-old. And we were explaining it in the context of this vote. And he was sort of like, "Are you crazy? Like, why would anyone want more wolves?" So to the mind of a 6-year-old, it's pretty clear that like wolf is not something that we need more of. Maybe the Little Red Riding Hood propaganda has achieved its goal here.
Maybe. But a lot of research, you know, has shown that in areas where wolves have been reintroduced, you know, the ecosystem balances itself out properly.
Right. And then, I mean, what is it? The textbook example now is Yellowstone, where wolf reintroduction has helped to balance out some of the kind of grazing populations of herbivores, and that has helped to improve some kind of ecosystem productivity, the return of certain kinds of tree species. And so, I mean, it's a very complicated kind of ecosystem science, systems science question. And it's not just about ecosystems, it's about the people living there too.
Right, because people are part of the ecosystem. Absolutely.
But that's, I'm glad you had that article here. Okay, so with that, I'm just going to briefly mention this other thing that I found this week, and I won't dig into it because it's It's pretty cool, but it's a little bit strange also. It's called the Feral Atlas, the More Than Human Anthropocene. And if you're not familiar, the Anthropocene is this new geologic era that we exist in now, or is it debatable? Maybe we'll talk with Mary Hill about this in a second. But then the idea here is that the Anthropocene is not just about people, it's about the ecologies that now we've perturbed and created new ecologies that exist sort of now independent and spinning off from the changes that humanity has made to the planet. So we'll include this in the notes and then take a look. This is an atlas of sort of kind of the feral Anthropocene, but we won't stay there too long, or we won't stay there long right now. Okay, so with that, should we go ahead and bring Mary on? What do you think?
I think if she's ready.
Are we good to go? Thumbs up? Okay, thumbs up. We're going to bring Mary on right now. All right, welcome, Mary.
Hi, how are you, Pat?
I'm good. Well, I mean, 2020 good.
Great. Your
good as you can be.
Great. I like Square Park, Circle Park that's square.
That's right, yeah. I didn't get to talk about Bumble Gate. That's another great one.
Yes.
Everyone, for anyone just tuning in, thanks for joining the Sustainability Happy Hour. We just brought on our special guest today, Dr. Mary C. Hill. And Mary, would you mind just giving a brief introduction? I know we both know you a little bit, but for our millions of viewers watching.
Millions of viewers. Yep, so I'm a professor at the University of Kansas, though I live in Boulder, Colorado. You can see I spend time on planes, but I'm on sabbatical this year at SoGES, so that's extremely exciting. I spent 33 years of my career at the US Geological Survey, doing mostly very geeky things like solvers and optimization and stuff, and got frustrated that I felt like modeling wasn't making the change in the world we had all envisioned in the 1980s, and we were doing really stupid things. So I retired and had this opportunity at University of Kansas to work in the geology department. And what I really wanted to do was bring together science and policy. And I was really interested in environmental issues, and really that led me to food, energy, water, because I had come from a hydrologic background. When in the early 90s, it was like if you were a hydrologist, you had, I mean, if you were going to work in science and be a scientist, you had to work in natural systems. You didn't work in people disturbed systems of any kind. Except that there's a problem here, like at least for the groundwater, which I was in, about 90% of groundwater is used for agriculture. So what do you do? So I started plugging away on that, and I've been at the universities. This is my 7th year. It took me about 4 years to figure out how to actually write an NSF grant, which I hadn't done before, and get one funded. So I have a project called FEWtures, where it's FEWtures. And the basic question is, we have these environmental systems, they're stressed for a variety of reasons. The economic activities that we're doing are putting a severe strain on the system. What could we do going forward that would actually work with the environmental system, would take advantage of what's there without depleting it? And I mean, there's a whole thing about regenerative agriculture and trying to get regenerative and not just sustainable, but all the way to regenerative. And those ideas kind of thread through the project.
Can you tell me a little bit more? What do you mean by the difference between regenerative and sustainable?
Sustainable basically means keep it the way it is now. Don't make it any worse. Okay, and hopefully that means it would be able to go on into the future in its current capacity. But a lot of our systems have actually, their capacity is less than what they were at one time. Our soils in particular are much less than what they were. And so trying to do things that actually enrich the soil and make it better than it is now. A lot of people in that field want to do away completely with artificial fertilizer. Okay. And yet if you on average, my understanding is on average, the nitrogen in people's bodies if you look at the isotopes, about 40% of most people, 40% of their nitrogen comes from artificial fertilizer. Right. So fertilizer really sustains a significant part of agricultural output.
That's a crazy stat, by the way.
That's a crazy stat.
Like looking
right?
at, I mean, in terms of the kind of composition of our own kind of contemporary modern bodies. I mean, it's one thing to criticize kind of monoculture, industrialized, mechanized agriculture. Okay, there are critics of that. But then it's another thing to say, well, look, if you want to continue having your lifestyle, the diet that you have, you can look at yourself and identify that, like, what are you eating and where does it come from? And that's a very telling it's a telling reality of how challenging it is to change things or move things in a different direction. I just wanted to back up real quickly. You said you buzzed past FEWtures, FEW. Could we, for all the viewers out there that don't know what FEW stands for in the context of kind of sustainability, maybe you could just briefly touch on that. Absolutely.
Yes. FEW, food, energy, and water. So it's the acronym that's been used by the National Science Foundation, and a bunch of organizations to really identify that system that food, energy, water cannot in some sense be thought of as individual components. They're always interacting. So agriculture feeds energy through biofuels. It produces food, okay, and it uses water. So agriculture is one place that all of these clearly come together in very, very dependent ways. And the regulation, and then you also have to think about the whole regulatory environment. You have to think about the farmers and their communities and their economies. So the system is very complicated. It has a lot of pieces, and if you don't think of them all together, you're not likely to produce solutions that are actually going to work. If people don't like what you're doing for some reason, they're not going to adopt it, regardless of how advantageous you might show it to be. They won't trust you.
So you're working on this. Did you have a question, Micah?
Nope, go ahead.
So you're working on this project then. Thank you for explaining that. Do you have a particular focus area? Because I imagine you could look at food, energy, water, this nexus that occurs among these different sectors. You could look at it in like lots of different places, right? So do you have a particular spot you're looking at this?
Yeah, we have a particular topic. So let me do that first. And that is that if we're gonna think about having a new economy that actually works for the environment and works with the environment, we have to think about new ways of doing things. So some of the things we're thinking about are using renewable energy to make ammonia in small scale plants that would probably be farmer owned. And we're just looking at the economic viability and also looking at the social acceptance of the ideas and the scientific viability and the engineering viability, the profitability, all those kinds of things. So we're looking at developing, using renewable energy in both cases to produce ammonia and to treat water. And let me go back to ammonia for a second. Ammonia can be used in two ways. One is it's a fertilizer. It's the source of a lot of that nitrogen, that synthetic nitrogen in our bodies. It also is an energy vector. Basically, you can use liquid ammonia as fuel in an appropriately constructed car. Okay.
Really?
So yes. So it's an energy vector. Yeah. So and actually, it is building momentum in terms of it's basically a hydrogen source.
Oh, I see. So when you say ammonia is an energy vector, you can then process it a little bit more to then use it in a hydrogen fuel cell, or?
No, you don't have to. It's very flammable on its own.
Right.
It's you can get about.
I see.
Yeah, you can get about 30% of the energy out of it that you put in to make it. So if you have a grid, if you're on an electric grid and you're making ammonia, if you can use really cheap electricity when there's not a lot of demand to make the ammonia, and then sell it back when when the price is at least three times higher than what you bought it for them, you can just make money that way. Okay. And we're also thinking about, well, we can use that ammonia to power our the ammonia production system itself, or if we want to, if the energy prices get really high. For those times during the day when the energy price is really high.
Right.
Does ammonia burn cleaner than other fuels?
Yes, it produces water. So the pollution related to ammonia comes from if you use natural gas to produce it.
Huh.
Burning the ammonia itself doesn't. So if you use renewable energy to produce it, it's very, very clean. And in recent, one of the applications is that's coming up is the maritime industry is very interested in finding a fuel that's non-polluting. And there's considerable work and design going on to use ammonia for that. So ships.
Right.
Yeah, and Australia is particularly innovative in that.
And so aren't most farms like pretty focused on making food? Do they have time and space and energy to start thinking about this?
They're currently spending a lot of money on ammonia. So for example, in Kansas, I think in 2000, I have numbers from 2012. I think the agricultural production of Kansas that year was for crops, I believe, was $16 billion. $1 billion of that went to buying fertilizer. So it's a large part of their expense. So if there was a way for them to control it and have it done locally and be able to produce it for themselves, if that can be done economically, there are, and that's part of what my project is analyzing is whether that's true. And I'm going to actually pack it back to you related to where we're focusing. So we're looking at this problem in an arid agricultural region that we're calling the Central Arkansas River Basin. It includes parts of Kansas, Colorado, New Mexico, Texas, and Oklahoma. And it basically, it's the Arkansas River Valley that extending from the foothills in Colorado, foothills of the Rockies in Colorado and New Mexico to basically where the basin gets wet, starts getting wetter.
So this makes me, this is circling back a little bit to a previous guest who was talking to us about water law in Colorado, among other things. And so what does that come into play here when you have, what was that, 5 different states? I imagine that the jurisdictional issues and kind of the regulatory issues with that many different states that might have quite varying regulation. What does that even look like when you're trying to do this kind of project?
Well, I think what we're working with advisory group members who are in the different states, and truthfully, because our group a lot of us are based in Kansas, we're definitely stronger with our Kansas representation in the advisory group than the other states. But we're looking for people, and if there are people on this phone call who are interested, please talk to me. But so there, but so we kind of use our Kansas as our base model, and Kansas has its own particular way of dealing with the energy industry and the agricultural industry, and then we can sort of then relate that, and we can, based on that experience, say you really need to have these kind of regulations. These are the kind of regulations you have to have for this to prosper. These are going to be the sticking points. And so part of our project is identifying those. So yeah. What's
your dream output from this? So I imagine that in your proposal to NSF, you had some really nice systems diagram about this is the way the whole system is going to work. And this goes into that, this goes into that, this goes into that. Boom. You've got your perfect ammonia generation from renewable energy. And then you've got like a car driving off that's powered buy ammonia. So like, what's your realistic hope out of this? Because it sounds like a cool, ambitious project that could go in lots of different directions.
Yeah, and really, the goal is to right now the communities and economies in the region that I've defined are having a tough time. Parts of them depend on the Ogallala Aquifer. They're running out of water. They're struggling. North Texas is like that. Kansas is like that. Oklahoma, parts of Colorado. So they're really struggling. So truthfully, I mean, there are the technical goals and what the businesses would look like or could look like, and that we would be able to say, yes, this could be profitable. Yes, it's not that hard to do. Yes, there's already, and there's small ammonia plants that you can buy off the shelf, but you can order. But could this all work together to really be financially viable? And then the really big thing is, could these communities that have had declining populations, difficulties economically, difficulties with water resources, could they be set on a path that would be prosperous for them, that would provide a really good, strong future for them? I mean, that's if I can feel out of this that I made any contribution toward that kind of evolution, that's what would thrill me.
So as I'm trying to sort of imagine like what one of these farms would look like, it made me think of this video that was just sent to me that I shared from the SoGES channels. And it's a farm that has covered their croplands in solar panels. And they're like growing plants in the shade of the solar panels and then also generating and storing energy. Is that like one example of what it would look like, or is it wind turbines on the ground?
What state is that in?
It's actually down in Longmont in Colorado.
Oh, it's in Longmont. And they must have, did they use solar cells that allow sunlight to go through?
I'm not sure. It was just a Now This video, so it was like a little 2 minute.
I've seen the idea of building a greenhouse where you use solar panels to that allow certain amounts of light through of the right kind. But so like
this would involve maybe in some cases like putting wind turbines on your property as well where you're farming.
Yeah. So this would, and wind turbines don't take up that large a spot. You have to have the road to the base of it, but you can integrate, just like the solar panels you're talking about. You can integrate it into the agricultural activities on the piece of land that you have. So and I think there's some really exciting ideas, and they're really critical if we're going to maintain our food supply. I mean, this is really the breadbasket of the world, not just locally, but of the world.
Yeah.
And,
if you're joining us right now, I just wanted to chime in and say that we are this is the Sustainability Happy Hour, and we are joined by Mary Hill, professor at Kansas University. I said it's Kansas University, right?
University of Kansas.
University of Kansas.
It's a confusing acronym.
It is. It's just like it's just like CU.
It's just like CU. It's not CU. It's University of Colorado. And we're talking about food, energy, water, sustainability, and the tension between what's regenerative versus what's sustainable. And just to kind of pick up on what you were just saying about sort of this region of the country, the United States, is an important breadbasket locally, nationally, and even globally. And so that's what you were talking about in terms of almost like modifying or modulating how this existing industrial agriculture is functioning in this part of the world. Do you see this as potentially like an alternative path for places that haven't really mechanized yet? Because there are parts of the world that are using mortarboard plows, that are using much more simple technology for agricultural production. And the typical path, at least as far as I've seen, has been you keep producing. Maybe everybody bonds together, sells the land, and then you've got like a nice big patch of land that lends itself well to industrialized, kind of mechanized agriculture with tractors and everything else. And that's been the path, and that's fed us, right? That's the nitrogen in our bodies. But do you see this kind of as a part of a different option, an opportunity to do agriculture, address this nexus in a different way, the food, energy, water nexus?
Yeah, a lot of those places you're talking about, some of them, for example, right now don't have access to synthetic fertilizer. Now, to the extent that they would see that as advantageous, the local fertilizer production might allow those farms to stay smaller, and
which might not be bad, right?
Right, it might not be bad. They might be able to use small scale fertilizer, and that was in our chemical engineer on the project, Peter Fromm from Washington State University, hypothesized that would be the circumstance, that the lower temperature methods of creating fertilizer that he's trying to create, that and small scale production plants, which they're small, they can fit in, you can fit a couple of them, I think, in a semi. And each of them is probably good for providing fertilizer for several thousand acres over a course of a year. So that he was hypothesizing in one article he wrote that it's places like in Africa that don't have big existing fertilizer plants to serve them that could benefit from this. Here we're taking this into a system that already has some of those big plants, but because it allows the fertilizer to be produced without pollution, without adding carbon to the atmosphere, that it has that advantage, and we're trying to see if it might also have an economic advantage.
You just said the buzzword that I was going to bring up, and what have in your project?
Which one's the buzzword?
What's that?
Which one's the buzzword?
I don't know. What am I going to say? But in your conversations about the project, has the idea of like a carbon tax come into play here? Because all of this is like a lot of our policy, agricultural policy, you name it, policy is predicated on absurdly cheap fossil fuel emissions. Like, it doesn't cost anything. If I want to go light some gasoline on fire, it doesn't cost anything aside from the gasoline in the match, and maybe a permit. Don't worry, I'm not going to do that.
Especially not right now.
Not right now. Oh God, so much smoke. But the idea being that if there was a carbon constrained world, right? Like now, let's say it costs, $30 a ton to emit carbon, at least here in the United States. Was that factored in at all into how this project could be more competitive potentially?
In the economic modeling, you could add that, but okay. I think you have to kind of see if it'll stand on its own 2 feet in the system as currently existing. So I think if you're basically, if you're gonna talk to people about their livelihoods, they have to eat every day. Yep.
It makes perfect sense.
If you propose something that says, can you just put yourself on hibernate, please, for 2 years, and then it'll all be good, they're not going to go for it. So,
no, that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense.
So I think those kinds of things are obviously going to make these kind of solutions more attractive.
Right.
And government policies make a huge difference. And it's really kind of interesting. I started with my NSF proposal process related to this, not with this idea, but with the idea of taking renewable energy and integrating it into the income model for farms, and how could that work? And NSF, I think, appropriately said there isn't enough science questions in this. And so I was like, okay, how can we use it locally? But one of the reasons that it needs to be used locally, and it's hard to transfer it elsewhere is the policies related to providing transmission lines from one point to another in the United States. And this is my understanding, and if any of you are electrical engineers and know more about the grid than I, you can correct me. But my understanding is the place where the energy is produced, the current regulation is they pay 2/3 of the cost of the transmission line, and the receiving end pays 1/3. Okay. And that worked great when you had subsidized railroads taking the coal from Wyoming and taking it to a power plant in Chicago that was pretty close, and then they burned it and created the electricity, and that worked fine. But now when you're creating wind energy in Kansas and trying to get it to Chicago, and they're supposed to pay, or Kansas City or wherever, and they're paying 2/3 here. So there are places in Western Kansas where electricity prices have gone up locally because of this rule, which makes no sense. Which makes no, and the energy company, the co-ops are having trouble. It's just, our regulations haven't adjusted.
Right. Yeah. Boy, that's interesting. I didn't know about that.
I found out about it 2 years ago and was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, that would definitely, that would mess up your plans for your wind farm potentially, the farther you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Micah?
Well, I was just going to say, so I know we're getting a little bit close to time, but I had one more question kind of before we start wrapping things up. You had said in your introduction earlier on in the show that you had gotten away from modeling, like environmental modeling, because you didn't feel like it was having the impact that you wanted it to do. And so now that you're working more in policy and doing this project, what is the would you say is like the most inspiring part of your work, or like what is the most rewarding part of what you're doing right now?
I love the bigger systems that I'm working with and all the different pieces to it, the economics, the sociology, I as well as the engineering and the earth science and the chemistry. I love like melding those and trying to get it all kind of. I'm never going to be a specialist in all those other areas, but trying to get it to meld in my head, trying to get the patterns to meld in my head and to kind of see how these systems might work has really been the most fun. The people are the most fun. The people I get to interact with, and so that's the most fun and the most challenging.
They're often the same.
They're often the same.
True. True.
Yeah. So and just to
do we have any?
This? Yeah.
Cool.
Sorry about that.
No problem, Pat. Go ahead. Please.
I was just going to say, if we had any questions from the audience, please chime in as we are starting to wrap up. We had a comment actually from Julie Kallenberger, who was a previous guest on the show.
You're making friends, Mary.
You're making friends. Welcome to CSU.
Awesome.
I'm sure you're already connected with some of our water faculty and research staff, though I'll follow up with some specific contacts who might be interested in your work. Awesome. Look at this. Connections.
That would be great. That would be great. Does she have my email address? Does she have
we'll make sure. We'll make sure Julie's got it. So I guess
there we go. That's what it's like being a SoGES visiting fellow.
Yeah, no big deal. You're just going to have so many contacts.
It's an odd year to be a visiting fellow.
So to zoom out, so I know you're interested in sort of big picture sustainability. As a kind of as we wrap up the show, what are you thinking you might want to do next in terms of kind of sustainability projects, whether it's teaching or research or whatever, could be, citizen science, whatever it is. I'm just curious, kind of, not to say that the FEWtures project is done, but I mean, that's one project that you've been doing. What else do you have kind of that you're hoping to work on? I guess anything, open-ended.
Yeah, I really already retired from one job. So I'm not planning a 20-year career at this point. So, or 30-year career, or whatever. So I think I'm really interested. Especially we're 1 year into a 5-year project. Especially the last 2 years, we're going to be focusing on developing online educational ideas. And a graduate course is committed for in the NSF proposal, and I'd like to do an undergrad course as well, just because we can reach so many more people. So really, I think at that point, teaching and being involved in a less full-hearted, full-time way in projects that could be in a variety of different directions, just things that look promising to me. And
so we have a question.
Yeah.
So Randall Barnes here has a question. So he's asking when. So how long till this ammonia tech is online? So this idea of 2 ammonia processing plants potentially in a semi. When is this now? Is it happening now, or is this kind of what's the timeline for delivery of this sort of technology?
The small-scale ammonia plants running basically on Haber-Bosch, which is the historical technology for ammonia production, you can order it from Siemens tomorrow.
Oh wow! Okay,
cool.
Yeah, you can order it. Yeah, the technology of trying to get it. So one of the problems with Haber-Bosch is it requires quite high pressure and temperature. If you can get to lower, especially I believe it's pressure, it allows you. I think it's pressure. It allows you to ramp up and ramp down better, and allows you to coordinate with the variability of renewable energy power.
Oh, right.
So,
okay.
Yeah. So that work is experimental. So
I see. Okay.
Those are theories. Those are not even concept proved yet. So it kind of depends.
Okay, so it's more like the theoretical side of it is maybe not quite fusion, but more in the theory realm, whereas the kind of typical Haber-Bosch is, that's off the shelf, right? Shelf. Maybe not home.
What's not off the shelf is doing it at small volume plants, and still being able to make a living.
Right. Okay. Interesting.
The big plants have been optimized over many, many decades. And and that industry tends to be kind of monopolistic, so they tend to the prices have been pretty high. And as Peter says, in recent years, they've kind of the price they charge. It used to be that the price they charged for ammonia pretty much followed the cost of natural gas, and those have departed at this point. Where they're so it's the economics of that is sort of interesting.
Okay, cool.
Good.
So we're going to wrap up now, but the question that we've asked every guest on the Sustainability Happy Hour is, what is one thing that's been kind of like a happy or a bright spot during this pandemic? Because the pandemic in 2020 in general has just been kind of wah, 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 right? Like not a good time. But what's maybe something that's been a positive thing? It doesn't have to be work related, but just something that's maybe been, oh, that's nice. That's a good thing.
For me, it's actually pretty easy because, as I said, I'm at University of Kansas, and my home is my husband, my dog, and my house are in Boulder, Colorado. Wow. So my university is extremely good to me and has already been focusing me on online learning stuff. So I feel so bad for people who had to figure that out in 2 weeks. But I've been able to be home.
Oh, that's really
cool. The virtual world has been working.
It's been, and so much of my work has been virtual anyway, because like I have 4 different universities on the FEWtures project, and so much of it is online. So for me, it's just been a lot. It's been a lot less travel, and so for me, it's been really good. But then I think about all those people that it cost them their jobs. It's the cost of their income. So I feel real strongly about trying to get money to food banks and stuff like that. So getting connected with that part of the world is good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say thank
So,
you so much. Oh wait, what's that? What were you gonna say?
well, I was gonna say, so you guys have to say something too. Have you shared with people before?
Oh,
what
geez.
your
That's true.
process
No, normally people don't really turn it back on us like that.
Well, I think for me, actually, maybe I think that might be how we started it. Is that how we started it?
Oh yeah, this is a good.
I don't know. Oh,
How we
for me,
started
the beginning.
the show?
It was from,
no, that might be how we started this question. I don't know. So for me, the answer is that I got to know my kids so well during like the lockdown part. I mean, it was like crazy exhausting. I've never been more tired in my life. But typically you spend as a parent in kind of contemporary 2 working parent homes, you spend a couple hours with your kids in the morning, maybe a couple at night, but everybody's crabby. And so it's like you don't see your kids very often. And because they're at daycare or school. And during the lockdown, I was like, nope, we're here all the time, 24/7. And it was honestly pretty cool to be able to spend so much time getting to know my 1.5-year-old who just turned 2 and my 5-year-old who just turned 6. And that was an unexpected silver lining to a lockdown during a pandemic, was being able to spend that much time with family. Yeah, that's mine. Easy answer.
That's nice. That's nice.
Mine is kind of like that, but flipped on its head a little bit. So all of my family lives in Wisconsin, which is where I'm from. And I have 2 brothers that I'm close with, and they both have significant others that I'm very close with. And when I moved out here, I talk to my parents pretty often, but I don't talk to my siblings that often. We get along, but we're not like buddies where we're hanging out all the time. And then when the pandemic hit and all of a sudden there were all these new technologies for like Zooming each other, we use an app called House Party. And even though I could have been doing this with my siblings the entire time, ever since I moved away. It was just sort of the like little kick in the pants that you needed to say, hey, like, let's get on a call this weekend and all chat and stuff. So that's been fun.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Excellent.
Well, Mary, this has been outstanding. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us on our silly sustainability happy hour.
I love it.
And we're looking forward to, I guess you're here for the rest of the year. So
I'm on sabbatical. I'm all yours.
That's right. So it'll just be fun.
I can't really come and come up there.
I know, but things will change. I'm hopeful that things will
change. Do you have any faculty whose houses are in danger with the fire?
Oh, I don't. Well, actually, I don't know. Not. I don't think so. Fort Collins in general is pretty safe right now. It's once you get essentially anywhere west of the reservoir line for Horsetooth Reservoir, that's when it starts to get a little dangerous in terms of the fires.
And CSU has, I've gotten a bunch of emails from CSU about like the Csu Cares Fund, which they're deploying for folks that might be living up closer where they've been evacuated.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, I live west of Boulder, and I was we were evacuated for 3 days in 2000.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and our house it was fine. Actually, no structures were lost in that fire, but we have meadows across the way instead of forest now.
Wow. That's wild.
Yeah, it was wild. It was completely wild. So I know a little bit about what those people are doing. Oh.
Yeah, sure.
Well, thanks again. And I'm sure that we'll be chatting with you more, and we'll make sure that we get all this stuff up online so people can check it out.
That sounds great. And please, people, if you have questions, I'm really happy to hear from folks. I want to.
All right.
Perfect. Well, thanks a lot, Mary.
Thanks, Mary.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay. Well, what do we have to talk about now?
I've just got a few SoGES announcements to wrap up with. Quick, though, before we do that, if you just tuned into this talk or you really liked it and you want to learn more about Mary's FEWtures project, she actually did a seminar for us back in September, and that recording is on our YouTube channel and also on our Facebook page. So you can check it out there. And then don't forget to sign up for email updates. If you if the whole every other week thing is confusing for you and you're like, are we on this week? Are we off? I will email you with.
How do you get there?
You go to sustainability.colostate.edu/sustainability happy hour. No spaces.
Wait a second.
And there's just a little form.
I'm going to test you. Sustainability.colostate.edu. Oh, cancel.
/sustainability happy hour. And this does not sign you up to the general SoGES email list. So if you're like, no, I don't want all your emails, I just want happy hour emails, that's what this list does.
Boom.
Yep.
And cat videos. I'm going to send you a ton of unsolicited cat videos.
He can't do that, I promise. He does not have access to the email platform.
Too bad. You're lost. They're great cat videos.
You're lost. And then we actually have an event coming up. Actually, while you're there, if you want to go down to the engagement and the events tab. Engagement at the top bar.
Yeah.
You're in education and training. Engagement. There you go. Event calendar. This is just like helping my mom with her phone.
What's that? Is that a button?
And then pop on over to November.
November, boom.
There you go. There you go. Oh, we're almost there. Recommendations for strengthening sustainability programs in higher education. We are doing a joint seminar with the Department of Ecosystem Science and Sustainability. And Dr. Chris Boone is going to be talking about the latest report that came out in October 2020 from the National Academies of Sciences and Engineering.
Oh, cool.
So you can register for it there. It is going to be November 10th at 11 a.m.
Boom.
Yep.
And you can, I think, can you register?
You hit that register link down at the very bottom.
Oops. Down here.
Yep, and that'll bring you to a Zoom page to get the link and register.
That looks like a good one.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting.
Okay.
And then we'll just queue up our next guest for next week, or 2 weeks from now. Dr. Carrie Chennault is a postdoctoral fellow at CSU, and she is going to talk to us about social sciences in the sustainability realm and a feminist lens when studying such topics. And so we're really excited.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Happy
Friday.
Happy Friday. TGIF.
TGIF.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody for watching, and we will see you again in 2 weeks.
All right. Bye.